Grandma won't even notice it's gone. She barely remembers where she puts her glasses. That's what I heard my daughter-in-law say through the guest room door, holding my late mother's wedding ring up to the light. My name is Barbara Lindqvist. I am 76 years old, and this is the story of the ring my daughter-in-law tried to take and the reason it was never actually hers to find. Welcome to Grandma Never Forgets. My mother's wedding ring is not an especially valuable piece by any objective measure. A simple gold band with a small, old-cut diamond, worn thin in places from 60 years on her hand before it came to me. Its value has never had much to do with money. My mother wore that ring through the Depression, through raising 4 children on almost nothing, through burying my father and continuing on anyway for another 11 years without ever once considering taking it off. When she died, she left it to me specifically, by name in her own will, with a note that said simply, "For Barbara, who understands what this cost." I moved in with my son Eric and his wife Cassandra 18 months ago, after a fall made living alone in my own house feel less safe than it used to. A sensible, practical decision that I made with clear eyes, and, frankly, a fair amount of grief about the independence I was giving up. Cassandra was welcoming enough on the surface, setting up a comfortable guest room, telling everyone who'd listen how wonderful it was to have Grandma close by. I want to be fair to her. Some of that welcome was genuine, but somewhere in those 18 months, Cassandra developed a habit of referring to my memory in ways that felt less like concern and more like a narrative she was quietly building, mentioning to Eric within my hearing more than once that I seemed to be getting forgetful, misplacing things, not quite as sharp as I used to be. I am 76, not senile, and I noticed, the way you notice a pattern once you start looking for it, that these comments always arrived shortly before Cassandra asked to help organize some part of my belongings. The day that finally became impossible to ignore was a Saturday in September, when I came back from a walk earlier than expected and heard Cassandra's voice through the cracked guest room door, on the phone with her sister, holding what I could see through the gap was my jewelry box, turning something over in her fingers. "Grandma won't even notice it's gone," she was saying, laughing a little. "She barely remembers where she puts her glasses half the time. This ring is just sitting in a drawer, doing nothing. I could sell it, or honestly, it would look beautiful on Kimberly for her wedding next spring, and nobody would ever know the difference." I stood very still in that hallway for a long moment, the particular stillness of hearing plainly that someone you live with has decided your memory is failing enough to justify taking something that was never theirs. I did not open that door. I went back outside, sat on the porch steps for nearly 20 minutes, and thought very carefully about what I actually needed to do next rather than what I wanted to do, which was considerably less measured. Here is what Cassandra did not know because I had never mentioned it to anyone in that household. 3 years before I ever moved in with Eric and Cassandra, back when I was still living independently and thinking clearly about what would happen to the things I valued most, I took my mother's ring, along with 2 other pieces of real sentimental and financial value, to my attorney and had them formally appraised, photographed, and written into my will as a specific bequest, naming my granddaughter Josie, Eric's daughter from his first marriage, as the sole recipient of that exact ring, by name and by description, with the appraisal document attached as an exhibit. And because I have never been a woman who takes unnecessary chances with things that matter, I did not keep that ring in my jewelry box at all. What sat in that box and what Cassandra had been holding up to the light that Saturday afternoon was a costume replica I'd purchased years earlier for exactly this kind of eventuality, a decoy nearly identical in appearance, worth perhaps $40. The real ring has sat in a safe deposit box at my bank since the day I had it appraised, accessible only to me and, upon my death, to the attorney executing my estate. I did not confront Cassandra that day. I waited deliberately for a family dinner the following week, where I asked her casually in front of Eric whether she'd been going through my jewelry box recently, since I'd noticed some pieces seemed slightly disturbed. Cassandra, caught off guard, admitted a little too quickly that she'd been just looking, admiring things, nothing more. I let that sit for a moment, and then I told her plainly that I'd actually overheard her conversation with her sister the previous Saturday, every word of it, and that I found it interesting she'd chosen to describe a decades-old costume replica as though it were my mother's actual wedding ring, since the real one had been sitting in a bank vault for 3 years, formally willed to Josie, with documentation that would make any attempt to sell or gift it considerably more complicated than she'd apparently imagined. The table went very quiet. Eric looked at his wife with an expression I hadn't seen on him since he was a teenager caught in a lie, somewhere between disbelief and disappointment. Cassandra, to her credit, did not try to keep arguing once the actual facts were on the table, though what she said next told me everything I needed to know about her intentions. I just thought, since you don't really wear it anymore, and Kimberly's getting married, it seemed like it would finally get some use instead of sitting in a drawer. I told her that a piece of jewelry sitting quietly in a drawer unused is still not hers to redistribute simply because she decided unilaterally that it would be more useful in someone else's hands, and that the entire concept of inheritance exists precisely to prevent people from making that decision for someone who is still alive to make it herself. I told her, too, that the comments about my memory, the ones I'd been hearing secondhand for months, made considerably more sense now that I understood what they'd been building toward. Eric was the one who was genuinely shaken by all of it. More than Cassandra, I think, because he had to reckon with the fact that his wife had been quietly narrating his mother as declining, specifically to make a theft, dressed up as inheritance in advance, feel more justifiable to herself. He apologized to me that night sincerely and had a much longer, much harder conversation with Cassandra after I'd gone to bed, one that I understand did not go smoothly for her. Cassandra and I have settled into something considerably more formal since that dinner. Polite, correct, without the easy warmth that existed before, and I've made my peace with that particular loss, because warmth built on someone quietly waiting for you to become forgetful enough to steal from isn't warmth I especially want back. Josie knows about the ring now, the real one, and came with me last month to see it at the bank, tried it on in the little private room they let you use, and cried the good kind of tears, the kind my own mother would have recognized instantly. That is my story. One decoy ring in a drawer, one real ring in a vault, and an old woman who learned that sometimes protecting what matters most means letting someone believe for a little while that they'd already gotten away with it. If someone has ever underestimated how much you notice, this is your reminder that being older doesn't mean being unaware. It often means you've simply had more practice seeing people clearly. Drop a comment and tell me about a family heirloom that means the world to you. Subscribe to Grandma Never Forgets, and I will see you in the next one.